All right, I'll call this meeting to order and like to ask the interpreters to come up and make their announcements. Yeah, you can do it right up here at the dais.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, Spanish interpreter. Soy Jennifer, intérprete para español. Si alguien ocupa interpretación, levante la mano y le voy a dar el aparatito. Anybody Spanish interpreting?
There could be some online.
Oh, okay. También si hay gente que tiene comentarios públicos en línea, cuando hablan, voy a proveer interpretación consecutiva. I'll be providing consecutive interpretation if there's any public comments from folks online.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sun, Korean interpreter. 안녕하십니까. 오늘 이 공청회에는 한국어 통역이 제공이 됩니다. 그래서 한국어 통역이 필요하시면 헤드셋을 요청하시면 한국어 통역을 동시로 들으실 수 있습니다. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Helen. I'm the Mandarin interpreter. 你好，我是中文翻译。您需要中文翻译的话，你可以听耳机。谢谢。
Thank you.
Bảo Lưu Certified Court Interpreter. Kính thưa quý vị, tôi là Lưu Ngọc Bảo. Tôi sẽ thông dịch cho quý vị cho cái buổi họp ngày hôm nay của mọi người, và những người ở trên trực tuyến cũng sẽ được dịch cho quý vị. Xin cảm ơn quý vị rất nhiều. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll go ahead and ask the clerk to take roll.
Chair Seaborn.
Here.
Vice Chair Lira.
Here.
I usually do these alphabetical, but I'm not thinking that clearly tonight, so I'm going to start on this end. Commissioner Jaramillo. Commissioner Nelson. Here. Commissioner Savanara.
Here.
Commissioner Vallejo. Here. And Commissioner Bushala is online.
Here.
Great, thank you. All right. Next on the agenda, ex parte communications, although I'm not sure what kind of ex parte communications we'd have regarding the redistricting, but I'll open that up if any commissioners have any ex parte communications. I don't see anybody jumping in and waving their arms. All right. With that, we'll move on to the public hearing. This is redistricting process overview and input. The Commission will receive a report on the redistricting process and permissible criteria to consider when redrawing district boundaries and receive public input on district boundaries. The recommendation is to receive and file the demographer report on the redistricting process and conduct public hearing to receive input on the district boundaries. So with that, I will open this public hearing and ask Mr. Justin Levitt to make his presentation. Thank you.
I'll let folks at home know that if you can't hear the presentation through Zoom, because the sound sometimes doesn't work for that computer, you can watch it on any of the cable channels or on our website.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Seaborn, members of the Commission, and members of the community who are both here tonight and watching on Zoom. My name is Dr. Justin Levitt, and my role tonight is to kind of introduce the process, the criteria, and some of the mapping tools that we're going to be using as we look throughout the process. At this point, I'll just kind of open up by saying, essentially, this redistricting process is something that the city has to do once every 10 years following the decennial census. Now, we were a bit delayed this year because our receipt of census data itself was delayed. Normally, we would expect to receive census data in March of the year ending in 1. This year, we did not receive census data until September. And I would say the state also had to make an adjustment to that census data, resulting in our receipt of the 2020 census data adjusted for the state's reallocation in September of 2021. And so that really is kind of an important background understanding why we're starting this process now in December rather than, say, earlier in the year. We are operating under a compressed time frame, but we do have, and we are working with the city to plan for several community workshops, both before and after draft maps are produced, particularly to help people use and learn how to use the tools. We'll do demos and have training on them. And so really, we want to emphasize that this is the beginning of the process, and we thank all of you who are coming here from the beginning. because we're going to be doing a lot of work coming into the new year. As I mentioned, this is required. Once every 10 years, in the year ending in 1, we have to look at the districts that were used in the last 10 years, or in Fullerton's case, since 2017, and see whether or not they still are in compliance with federal and state requirements. Another new thing this year is that the laws themselves have changed. One of the new laws the state has passed is the Fair Maps Act, which actually sets a new rank order list of criteria that the city of Fullerton and all cities across the state has to follow. And so my presentation is going to be a bit technical tonight, really going through the different criteria and process notes so that we're all on the same page and understand why we're doing what we're doing as part of this process. Like I said, this is the beginning, and we are going to have a lot of opportunity for the public to be engaged. But we want to make sure as well that we all understand the legal requirements and background. And so we start with the current district map. And we have copies of the current district map outside. I know they printed in portrait rather than landscape, but it gives you a little bit of a image you can take with you of what the current districts look like. The map is also available on the city's website. In addition to, on this one page or on the back, we have the original numbers from the 2010 census that were used to create the original map 5 years ago. And what we've done on the separate PDF, where it says City of Fullerton Current District Demographics, it's a separate sheet handout, is provided you with the current demographics as well. These are the numbers updated to the 2021 census, or 2020 census. And so that's why there's two sets of numbers here. The ones on the back side of the map are the original from the 2016 districting process or 2017 districting process. And then separately, we have a handout with the current district demographics. And one of the things we immediately see on the demographics is that although the original map only had about a 6% deviation between, the deviation just means the difference in population between the largest district and smallest district. And although it was about 6% in 2010, looking at it with the current numbers, that deviation has increased to 16%. This has been driven by growth, particularly in District 3. District 3 is 9% over its ideal population using those 2020 census numbers. And District 4, on the other direction, is about 7% under its ideal population using those district numbers. Now, this doesn't mean that any district lost population. In fact, all the council districts have grown from 2010 census into the 2020 census, but District 3 has added about 4,000 new residents, whereas other districts have only added, ranging from a couple of hundred people in District 4 to a couple thousand people in District 2. And so that growth rate is different across different parts of the city. And in District 3, that growth rate is relatively high compared to other areas. And in Districts 4 and 5, it's been lower than in other areas. And so that really is kind of our starting point for looking at the current map. Because as we look at the criteria and rules, the very first thing that we have to make sure we comply with is the federal requirement that population deviation, that difference between the largest and smallest districts, be no more than 10% of the population of a district. That's when we talk about that 10% deviation as a maximum. That's what the Supreme Court has repeatedly said over the last 3 decades of redistricting cases. Over 10% is not constitutionally, presumptively, it's not presumptively constitutional. And so equal population is something that we want to look at very carefully. How can we balance the population between the districts? And that may not just mean districts 3, 4, and 5 change. That may have impacts on all 5 districts in the map. For example, we may need to look at the Federal Voting Rights Act, another federal law that requires us to look at protected class communities groups that have historically faced discrimination or barriers to registration and voting, and make sure that we're not cracking a community of interest or a racial or a protected class community across more than one district, and also not packing that community into one district so they can't have an influence in more than one district if they are sufficiently large. While race cannot be the only factor or the predominant factor in the creation of a district, we do have to look at this protected class community and protect their rights as we look through all of the other criteria on this slide. So those two, equal population and following the Federal Voting Rights Act, those are our federal requirements that we have to comply with to stay on the right side of the federal courts. The middle column is basically our new Fair Maps Act. These are the new state rank-ordered criteria that we have to comply with in this specific order. And so that's a real big difference from previous years. Normally we would talk about balancing, and that's what the courts have normally talked about, balancing all of these criteria in this middle column. But now the state has specifically said in the Fair Maps Act to rank order these criteria and to deal with these four issues in this order. First is contiguity. Contiguity is the idea that all parts of a district must touch each other. In other words, that it must be one solid, one continuous district. You can't have a little bit on the west end of Fullerton and a little bit on the east end of Fullerton and call it and say, oh, well, we're jumping over the county land in order to achieve that. No, all parts of the district, you must be able to walk or drive from one part to every other part of that district without leaving the district. Second, undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. This is where we most need input from the community. The law says that socioeconomic or geographic areas that need to be kept together for the purposes of their effective and fair representation must be protected. Now I'm going to talk more about what neighborhoods and communities of interest are, but what I want to get across here is that they are in large part defined by us as a community, by the residents of the community, and the people who represent them, because every community has many potential communities of interest, but only by asking and finding out from people who live in that area do we know whether something is a community of interest here that needs to be kept together, or is something that is less important here. And I could go, I've been to hundreds of different jurisdictions, and the communities of interest differ, even between a school district and a city that are in the exact same location. Because a school district, for example, cares a lot about the school attendance areas, and for the city overlapping that school district, the attendance areas are much less important as communities of interest for what the city does. And so this is where we really need your input and input from the community as a whole. Third, easily identifiable boundaries. This is the principle that districts should be easy for people to understand. So to the extent that we can follow major roads, railroads, natural boundaries like waterways or canyons, rather than jogging across and through neighborhoods, we need to do so. And fourth is compactness. The law specifically defines compactness, not bypassing one group of people to get a more distant group of people. And like I said, these are rank ordered. So if a community is not compact, we need to keep that community together first before we concern ourselves with compactness. That's how that rank order will factor in once we look at draft maps. In addition, the Fair Maps Act also has a specific prohibition on consideration of political party or partisanship. You'll notice that our data set does not provide information on partisanship. I know that the old spreadsheet does, because back in 2017 that was okay to consider partisanship. But in our revised one with the current demographics, we do not include partisanship for this reason, and it is not something that can be considered as a justification for or against a particular map. And in the third column, other traditional districting principles. These are factors that courts have recognized over the years as being valid to consider. In our new state system, we would have to consider federal laws and state laws first and in that order. And then we would be able to, if we were, say, choosing between two maps we thought did an equally good job of keeping everything else we needed to do. Then we could look at other traditional districting principles that the courts have recognized, like minimizing the number of voters who shifted between election years, so that if voters cast a ballot in 2018 and are expecting to cast a ballot in 2022, they're not moved to a 2024 district that would give them 6 years between a potential vote for a council member. Or future population growth. If we know that an area of the city is likely to continue to grow, either because projects are planned for the next 10 years at a disproportionate rate in that area, or because we're going to experience a loss of housing in a different part of the city, maybe as part of a redevelopment, we can take that into account within that 10% deviation limits as to which districts are over or underpopulated. Or respecting the voters' choices, which is simply the principle that the voters have elected a council, and that districting shouldn't be used as either a way of targeting or protecting a particular council member. And so these are, again, our principles that we might consider, and it's open to discussion and debate to the extent to which we consider them after we take into account all of the federal and state requirements. And I want to say a couple more words about communities of interest and neighborhoods to kind of explain what we mean, because this is where we're asking for the most help from the community. The law, the Fair Maps Act, specifically uses the terms neighborhoods and communities of interest. And when it talks about neighborhoods, what it's referring to are areas with clearly defined geographic boundaries, kind of the building blocks of districts in the first place. So it could be as small as a single condominium complex or apartment building. It may also be a specific plan area or an area with a very clear geographic identity, bounded by specific roads or specific property markers or other neighborhood landmarks. When we talk about neighborhoods specifically, we want to think about things that we could find, say, by asking, a building manager or someone in the planning department, where is this community located? They are small. They are the small building blocks that make up districts. And they're probably areas that shouldn't be divided anyway, because to tell people in one apartment complex that buildings A through F are voting in District 1 and G through K are voting in District 2 would be kind of an odd decision under a lot of the criteria in the Fair Maps Act. We zoom out a little bit with communities of interest. Communities of interest are these geographic areas plus those shared issues or characteristics that help us define a community. So shared issues, shared problems, shared concerns, a shared need for representation, maybe even a shared identity, maybe a shared impact by a particular city policy or county policy or state or federal policy even. What we're looking for are these kinds of areas that need to be, or that have a certain similarity to them. And it could be anything. In some cities, it has to do with the age of different properties, neighborhoods that were built in a different time and place. In other cities, it has to do with the actual socioeconomic measures like income or renters versus owners, high density versus low density areas. In one city, it was areas where there was a large propensity for children, families with children, versus ones where we didn't see as many as many families living in. These could also be defined by other sorts of characteristics, areas that are impacted for weekends, or, I just was dealing with a city that wanted to deal with an area, that their community that was defined by a parade route. And because the city does a lot of events in this particular neighborhood, it's kind of become an identity, and they wanted to stay together for that purpose. In another city, it was an area impacted by short-term rentals. That's the shared issue that united that community together. And it's going to vary from city to city because the issues will vary, the demographics will vary, and so this is where we need to hear. And the truth is, you probably already know what a lot of these communities are because we give them names. So when we talk about, this neighborhood or that neighborhood, like the Walteria in Torrance, for example, communities that have identities, that have names, that have locations that people generally are aware of, are the communities of interest that we care about. And so what are they here in Fullerton and what defines them? That's what we're asking to look at. All this is taking place in this light of the socioeconomic or the demographic picture. As we already talked a little bit about the deviation, but I want to come down also to talk about the Voting Rights Act as well in this section. Currently, there are 2 districts with a Latino majority by total population and 1 district with an Asian American majority by total population. And looking at citizen voting age, or the eligible voter population, we have 2 districts that are over 40% Latino, District 4 at 46% and District 5 at 44%. And District 1 is majority Asian American by eligible voting population. If we look at the demographic maps, we have a color scheme here. The blues and purples are under 25 or under 35% Latino. The areas in yellow and pink are over 65% Latino. And what we see is that, there's not a single concentration of Latinos in Fullerton, but rather there are several neighborhoods, particularly in South Fullerton, as well as over in the very east end of the city, where we see some concentration of Latino populations. With Asian Americans, we use the same color scheme, so the purples and blues have a relatively low percentage, the pinks and yellows have a relatively high percentage. The northwestern portion of the city, particularly northwest of Bastonchury, is where we're seeing the significant Asian communities that are mostly kept together already in District 1. As part of this process, we are looking at other factors, and so we throw a couple up here just to kind of start the conversation. If there is a particular socioeconomic measure, income, I'm going to show you housing and income, but if there is something else we want to see, like education or children at home or language spoken at home, we'd be happy to bring that back at the next meeting and make that available online as well. So looking at renters and owners, I thought this pattern was interesting because we see a lot of areas with a large amount of apartments side by side with neighborhoods with very few apartments. Particularly, looking through the central and southern parts of the city, we don't really see any concentration of one or the other because it's areas of 75% or more renters next to 75% or more single-family homes. The one exception to this, of course, is at the very eastern end of the city, right around the university. And that's where we see that there's a really concentration of renters. Looking at income, we definitely see that the farther north we get in the city, particularly north of Malvern, we generally see higher incomes than the areas to the south, although there is a bit of a patchwork pattern as well in southern Fullerton as well. As part of this process, we are releasing a suite of tools. We are actually hoping to get them online, if not tonight, tomorrow, by the end of the week. Our goal with public participation and engagement is we want to hear from everyone, regardless of how they want to submit. Whether it's coming to a meeting and speaking in public, whether it's submitting a comment card or something in writing, or up to and including drawing a community map or a draft map of their own, we want to receive information however we can get it. And so we're working on many ways that people can let us know what they think and how the new districts should be configured. And if you don't draw your own full map or your community map, your comments are read. I personally read all the public comment we get on these matters, and we take that into account as we're looking at drawing our consultant draft maps as well. We like to be able to point to direction not only from the commission, but also from public comments we've received, and maps or community maps or maps showing people's neighborhoods or communities of interest as part of our review. And so our most simple tool that we'll have available in paper at all of our future workshops is simply a one-page population unit map. These are units that we've drawn, tried to follow some of those neighborhood boundaries to the extent possible, particularly following those major roads, railroads, and so forth, where we have you give you the total population of each of those areas, and then you can add together those population numbers until you reach the ideal population of about 28,790. For those of you who have Excel, we have a version of this kit that also comes with an Excel spreadsheet that you can just assign each of these population units to a district, and it will automatically do all the number calculation for you. When we have our first community workshop coming up next month, we will go through all of this with the community, and we'll have a chance for people to do it live in the meeting or work with the tools at our workshop. We also have 2 browser-based tools. Dave's Redistricting, which is great for our community of interest viewers, and also is a very intuitive tool to use. You sign up for an account. You can start with either the current districts or a blank map, and basically you use a paintbrush to kind of paint the different precincts or even the blocks until you get to the districts you want. And then it'll provide you, then once you go to save it, it provides you with a link that you can share with the city, email it to the city. We have a user guide that helps you use this on the website, or we say we will have once it gets published, a user guide that walks you step by step on how to use Dave's Redistricting tool, the DRA, as well as our 4th and final tool, the Caliper Online Redistricting tool. We have video and a step-by-step guide for both of these. Now, the Maptitude Online Redistricting tool is the most powerful tool because you really can look at all the data and all of the different columns and fields that we use as your demographers when we draw the maps. It's also natively available in 6 languages, including English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, and Korean. And it's also the most powerful of the different tools, but it has the steepest learning curve. And we would say that, make sure you give yourself some time to play around with this, and don't be hard on yourself if it takes you a little bit to learn it. I think even when I started learning Maptitude 10 years ago, or actually, gosh, I can't believe how long ago it is. It's 15 years now. It definitely took a while to become comfortable with it. So give yourself some time if you're planning on drawing a map using Maptitude Online Redistricting. That's one of the reasons we want to both have these tools available as soon as possible. And I'll say they're all ready. We're waiting on IT to get them up on the website. And it's one of the reasons why we are also doing the workshops in January and February to help people with the tools, to answer questions as you have them, because we want people to feel comfortable. We want the community to feel comfortable submitting maps through all of these different options. Beware, for many people who decide to take the plunge into Maptitude Online Redistricting, it is a little addicting. Same with Dave's Redistricting. I think we just processed 8 maps by someone in one city on Dave's Redistricting because they couldn't stop tinkering with their own map proposal, and so they kept copying and making minor adjustments. And if that happens, then we're going to ask you to pick your favorite one. Which one did you land on? Although we'll show you all the different versions that we receive through our public comments. And so that really takes us into our questions public hearing today. We're really looking to start this process off by getting guidance on those communities of interest and neighborhoods, those notable areas of the city and their boundaries. I'm also happy to address any questions or comments, or the city as well with respect to the process or legal requirements today as well. But thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'll open it up to the committee for any comments or questions. And if you'd like to start, I'll just start at my left end and we'll take it on through.
Ooh, I get to start?
Sure.
Excellent, because I have a number of questions for you. Thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Levitt. You really clarified a number of things, and I can't wait to nerd out on this software. I I have some questions for you. First of all, what is the process for requesting maps with additional SES variables, such as the poverty rate or other variables that we can obtain from the ACS 5-year estimates?
Yeah, if you just want to let, if you just want to let the I don't know, the title, it's the city clerk know, she'll provide it to us, and we will get those maps.
Okay, great. I'd also love to see table utilizing the 2020 data that you provided, the current district demographics, but that also shows the rate of change between perhaps 2020.
We can certainly show you the growth rates between the 2010 census and the
great.
2020 census numbers.
Excellent. I think that would be very, very helpful. I have a question about the mapping. Is it possible with Maptitude to layer multiple variables on one another when looking at the map, such as layering race with particular SES variables or other kinds of
So we
variables
do
available in
have
the data?
we do have each of those themes built into the Maptitude tool. So you can, basically there's a place where you can select a theme in the Maptitude for redistricting. And so you can see race, and then you can turn it and change it over to income. It's not possible to do that for like a matrix of 2 at once.
Okay.
That's a little bit too technologically complicated for the browser to handle.
Okay.
But we certainly have each of the thematics in there.
What can you talk a little bit more about kind of your process and how you'll be working with us? So I just want some clarity on how we'll work with the community, how you will present to us the maps that have been presented to you, the kind of dialogue that we as the commissioners will be able to have with you about the particular maps and so forth.
Sure. So we generally divide this process into 2 major phases. In this first stage, we are looking for information and input, gathering information that will go into the maps. So we're going to, in addition to public hearings here in front of the commission, we also have a couple of community workshops planned to both train people on the tools and to record feedback on communities of interest and so forth. We generally take all of that and synthesize it, and then come back to you with all of the public maps, plus an additional 2 to 4 NDC drafts. That really depends on a lot of factors, how many drafts there are, or how many drafts we come back with. And what we try to do is to, we definitely want to show you everything we've received. But we try to sort it into similarities, because what we find is that either we get somebody who's tinkering with a map and produces 8 versions of the same map where they've moved 1 or 2 blocks in each time, or that maybe there's a very natural way to divide, and many people are doing something very similar. And so we group them by those similar features. And then what we try to do is begin the process of narrowing it down to choosing focus maps, and then making changes based on the direction of the board or the commission to those focus maps to bring back revisions. Because it may not be possible to do everything, so we want to show you 2 options, like, okay, if you want to do this, here's A and here's B. Here's what we tried to do, and here's why you couldn't do both things at the same time in a map. And so in that stage of the process, it's iterative. We go back and forth with different options, taking the feedback and coming back with additional maps. And that could be not just NDC drafts, that could start with community maps. A lot of times what we get is, hey, here's a community map that we think works great in, say, the western end of the city. But we've got some concerns about the eastern end, and even the person who submitted the map has admitted, well, I don't know that area very well, so I just tried to draw a straight line. And so a lot of times what we try to do is listen, and it's part of our job, to listen to what people are saying and saying, okay, this is what works in the west and this is what works in the east. How do we put them together to create the final map that works for both halves of the community? And that actually works a good deal of the time, because oftentimes people like different things about different maps. And so trying to put those together is where is what we try to do for you.
Great, thank you so much. I just have one more question. Do you have any plans, and I'm curious if you're working with the city to ensure that the workshops will have interpreters available, or that workshops will be accessible for all in the community, given the various languages that are spoken in our city?
The city clerk will fully address that, but I'll say that we definitely are working on making sure the times vary and the locations vary to ensure that.
Great.
And we're also, as you can tell, we are going beyond our required language requirements and bringing in the Vietnamese and Chinese interpreters, and they will be at all of our meetings and our
Great,
workshops.
that's great. And also making sure that we have a workshop in District 5, since we lack that representation on the commission, would be excellent.
We are doing our best. We are very limited on available facilities because we are basically leasing them out to neighborhood centers, most of our facilities, so they're not really ours to use at the moment. But we're doing our best.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you again for this presentation. Appreciate your time and your work, and really look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vallejo. We'll turn it over to Member Seminara.
Thank you, Justin, for a very interesting presentation. Couple questions for you. Following up on Commissioner Vallejo's comments on submission of maps, we have multiple public hearings. How will the timing work with your submittal of maps to the commission? Will it be sequential after each hearing, or cumulative at a later point?
So that's going to be a bit up to the commission as well. We would generally suggest that, so essentially what we're going to have is a workshop and then another public hearing. And at that public hearing, we're going to present all of the maps that we've received from the public, as well as initial iterations of the NDC draft maps. Our suggestion is to reduce the number of maps received, assuming, of course, that we get a robust turnout, which I assume we will. And if we have more than 4 or 5 maps, then I would suggest reducing it to 4 or 5 maps, or even picking 2 or 3 focus maps, and then requesting changes to those maps that we will then come back with at the next. Well, I think it'll be another workshop at that point, where we'll have another opportunity for people to take into account the feedback that the commission has given at that hearing in their new round of draft maps, and we'll come back with the revised set of draft maps. You'll still have the old maps as well. Like, nothing is truly eliminated until you pick your final recommendation. However, you can designate, these are our preferred maps at this point. And we just say that because, sometimes commissions often reject a map, and then they hear from the community that that was a map that people like something about, and maybe it's not bringing back that map, but bringing back a feature of that map. Like, oh, we really like that District 3 and 5 boundary in that map, so how can we bring that into a different draft map? And so it is an iterative process.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask how the Cal State Fullerton and Fullerton College are treated in this process?
Sure. So Cal State Fullerton actually has a residential population living on it. And for the purposes of our process, they actually all live in one census block. All the people actually who live on campus. Now, it'll be up to kind of our process to see if that neighborhood or that community includes not just the university, but what areas around the university should be connected or kept with the university. And that's true of all colleges and universities. It's up to us to kind of determine, and some cities like Long Beach, for example, has a parking zone around Cal State Long Beach. And that has sort of become the de facto community of interest, the areas that are highly impacted by the parking issue there. And if we have something that helps us designate this is the area that the city or somehow the community has designated as the university neighborhood, we would want to see if we can keep that together under the second part of the Fair Maps Act.
Thank you. My final question is, we're using the existing district map on many exhibits. Obviously, you were not around when that map was formed. Your comments briefly on how that clearly, in my opinion, does not meet the current criteria?
So, yes, and I would say like NDC was not the demographer hired to work on the on the districting. So, I am new to the city of Fullerton in terms of my work here on the project. It certainly has, I'll say like, first of all, just for simple population reasons, it cannot be the map that is adopted under federal law. In addition, there are some concerns about dividing neighborhoods, particularly any sort of downtown or central community. And there may even be some issues with compactness, especially looking at districts, District 4, 3, and 4, for example. And that part of this is going to be asking the community, so how do we fix this? What works? If we have if we're radically changing other aspects of the map to balance population alone, what do we need to do to make the map work in that case?
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Nelson.
Thank you. I understand the tools. I'm looking forward to them being available online. I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lara.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very insightful. But at this time, I have no questions.
Great, thank you. Member Jaramillo.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but just a comment. The redistricting rules and goals. You kind of mentioned, I was glad that Commissioner Seminara brought it up. I was involved in the prior mapping process, and we knew it was pretty bad at the time, but council, approved it. So I'm glad now that's prohibited for political or shall not favor or discriminate against any political parties. I'm for or against, so I'm really happy about that too. So just a comment that I'm glad that rule is there now for this year. Thank you. You did excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bushala.
Yes, good evening. Again, I'd like to thank the demographer for his presentation, and I look forward to working on correcting this map that is obviously very gerrymandered, and get something that is suitable for all the residents of Fullerton, and and not discriminate against any one particular party or any race. I'd like to see a fair process, and I think we're on the direction to doing that. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, I think we'll open it up to public comments. And is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this present? Or if you're online, raise your hand, let our city clerk know.
Mr. Chair, do we need to move and to receive and file the report? If so, I'll move.
Until you hear from the public.
After public comments, we'll do that.
Good evening, Commission. I was actually hoping there'd be a lot more people here, but I guess with the recent COVID outbreaks, it's unfortunate. Maybe I do have a question regarding the AB 849 and what's currently in the elections code regarding notification for the meetings. It does say that there should be a, the city should be making an effort, a notable effort to communicate to the community. A couple of things I want to point out. Lucinda's already explained to me why there's a problem with the Legistar calendar, which the link on the city's front page goes to. Everything references this calendar that if you don't know to search for this commission, you don't get the meetings. That needs to be remedied. I'm concerned about, someone at the end saying, hey, you guys didn't follow this process. You went through this community process. You've decided to find a map that you want, but it's going to go to a judge because you didn't follow the process. I don't know if that could happen, but I have those concerns. As well, the notification didn't go up on Facebook, the social media channels that are supposed to be communicating with the public until yesterday. As well, the local newspaper, the Fullerton Observer, was not notified by the city about this to post it. I notified them about it. I volunteer for the paper. So I don't think the city is making enough effort to communicate to the public about this first public hearing. And I have grave concerns about the community meetings that are coming up, because those are really the crux of making this process work, is getting a wide variety of input. I have some specific questions from the presentation about race cannot be predominant reason for districting, but I understood that there was some case law that's been sort of accepted that allows for affirmative gerrymandering. If you could discuss that, how that plays in. There was a discussion about there could be, potentially, or I have a question of, you have communities of interest. You would assume there's some agreement, but there's sort of overlapping communities of interest. What's the best conflict resolution there? If it came down to that. What's some other questions? Oh, I have a question about the census data. I don't know if it's sensitive or has any knowledge of communities of interest. And so are we able to, using those mapping tools, able to draw a boundary that doesn't follow a census boundary? Because, then you have to kind of figure out, what's the data within there, right? I like that you mentioned the parade route, because we have a sparkle ball hood.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hello, my name is Patty Tudor, and I'm glad to hear that you brought up income as one of your elements you're looking at. Along with that, I think it would be appropriate for you also to look at housing. I know right now Fullerton and a lot of the cities are going through the effort to build their housing elements, and I know that's a struggle. And I know in the last time period, the city of Fullerton did not do a very good job of making sure that we built affordable housing. So please consider that along with looking at income and other variables. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Harry Longenbacher. I live in Fullerton. And my main comment for tonight was to be about the outreach, much of what Jane talked about. I was concerned. I was signed on to a letter that we were working on yesterday. And as we were working on it, I got my first email notification from the city listserv. It had never been on one of the regular community newsletters that I subscribe to. And about 2 o'clock, it was posted on Facebook finally, the first mention there. And I think probably yesterday it was that it finally appeared on the city homepage, which is great because it's very difficult to navigate the official city calendar page. It's impossible for me to describe it to people without like a YouTube video or something, how to find things in there. So I want to thank the city clerk and whoever is responsible for making these improvements. But we obviously need more outreach. The demographer, and I thank him too, his report belongs on the webpage, so it's prominent so people can understand this process. But what was I going to say? That it's good to have it on the homepage. Sorry, I digressed and I lost my train of thought. So, I was going to point out that you've got more commissioners and staff here than you have citizens to comment. And the demographer pointed out how important it is to get input from the community to define the communities of interest. I don't know much about the West Side. I know about my neighborhood around Fullerton College. But you've got to have more than 2 people per district showing up and participating. I don't know how many people are online. I think that's great too, because I'm concerned about COVID I hope that the Zoom virtual sort of participation will be successful. So given the lack of outreach, I think it's important to improve on that and get more community input before developing draft maps. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Perfect. My name is Kayla Assato, redistricting organizer with Orange County Environmental Justice. And just wanted to echo what has been said prior. The lack of outreach has been kind of not ideal, like sending out an email at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock the day before. It's not very sufficient. Just uploading a lot of this onto the website stuff, like day before, week before, sort of thing. Not really sufficient. But I wanted to thank you for all the work and comments and questions that you had leading up to this. It really helped me to understand a lot of the process and things to consider a lot more, even though I do this for my job. So it's nice to know where the city stands on a lot of these important topics. And I just wanted to talk about environmental justice as another community of interest that we should be taking into account. I know that south of Chapman, we have a lot of environmental justice communities that are impacted by police brutality, housing, low income. A lot of these communities are Latino. A lot of these communities are renters. But a lot of these communities are also like heavily impacted by the North Osceola Water Basin pollutants, other pollutants because of the train tracks. These communities on the Callan virus screen are deeply impacted by a lot of this, by these pollution burdens. And we need to be keeping these communities in our minds when we are drawing the lines between West and Southeast Fullerton. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. And we'll probably be, I know that I'll be coming back to a lot of these here, to each and every single one of these hearings to talk more about this, but I just wanted to keep that in mind for some of the data layers. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like our last speaker in person.
Yes, Vince Buck. I just want to express one concern about the lack of current voter registration data. I know the Act says you're not supposed to draw the lines to benefit or hurt a given party or words to that effect. But if you don't have the data up there, you don't know whether you've done that or not. And we don't know whether you've done that or not. So I think it's important that the current data be up there. The data has changed substantially since 2015 when it was the breakdown was essentially 38% Republican, 33% Democrat, to pretty much the reverse of that at the current. So I think we need that layer of data on the program. Thank you.
Thank you. And right before I turn it over to our online commenters or questionnaires, I did want to address Ms. Rands. I'm sorry your time did run out, but I do want your questions entered. If you could email them to Lucinda, and you can copy me on it if you want. We want to get those answered and have it be part of the record. Thank you. We'll now take our online folks.
And while we're talking about email, districtelections@cityoffullerton.com is the best email to use for all things district elections.
That is the appropriate one.
There's a good chance that it will get weeded out of my ever-increasing email inbox to my personal one. So, okay, Zoom. Julia Gomez. Hang on one second. I need to get my mouse in the right spot. There it is. You should be able to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Gomez, and I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California. Together with a few Fullerton residents that you've already heard from, as well as OSED, we sent a letter to the council and the commission making suggestions on how to engage members of the public, and we encourage you to review that letter. I will make sure to also resend the letter to the email that was just flagged to make sure you all get it. I won't go over all the details and suggestions, but certainly the webpage is missing some key information, including a completed FAQ section, as well as details. The current schedule lists the dates of upcoming meetings and hearings, but it doesn't list where the meetings will take place or link to the agendas for each meeting. It also doesn't include any map submission deadlines. And so I know Dr. Levitt was referencing that the public will be able to submit maps, but there's currently no deadlines about when they should do that. So we think that's really, really important. And finally, as was already highlighted, there hasn't been a ton of people showing up to today's meeting. And so we really urge the commission to add one more public hearing before maps are submitted and before you all release draft maps so that you can hear from more community members. Another concern we raised in the letter is around the composition of the commission. Currently, the commission is made up of former council members and a developer that has funded recall campaigns and city council campaigns. In our view, these are clear conflicts of interest, and we really hope that the commission will work together to take steps to ensure that future candidates see and special interests do not play an outsized voice in this process. The mandatory criteria specifically prohibit you from considering incumbency in political candidates from the communities of interest assessment, and again, prohibits you from favoring or discriminating against a political party. So we hope that at every step of the way, you ensure that you're following the Voting Rights Act and community input as opposed to other interests not found in state or federal law. And finally, and we can't emphasize this enough, none of the criteria that was listed as other criteria in the presentation, including continuity in office and preserving the core of districts, are found in the Fair Maps Act. And you must completely disregard these criteria if they conflict with the mandatory criteria found in federal and state law, such as complying with the VRA or maintaining communities of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Susan Chang, you should be able to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Susan Chang. I'm speaking on behalf of Party for Justice. I also just wanted to echo what folks have said previously and would love to see more outreach and information on Fullerton's webpage. The communities of interest we serve in Fullerton primarily consist of Asian American, Latinx, Pacific Islander, undocumented, and immigrant communities, LGBTQ folks, and low-income communities of color. Many of these communities face similar issues due to the lack of resources provided, such as a lack of affordable housing due to gentrification and lack of rent control, and even lack of resources and support when cities were shut down due to the stay-at-home orders back in March of last year. Many of our members came and asked us for housing assistance, which we had to start to provide for families within Orange County to aid them with financial assistance and additional services. And many of these community members are the backbone of Fullerton's abundant small businesses and cultural landscape. We're also seeing more and more young folks from the large student populations of Cal State Fullerton and Fullerton College become actively involved in Fullerton's civic life. Young and working class Fullerton residents want nothing more than to have their fair share of resources so that their communities can thrive. Many students we work with want to see ethnic studies implemented in K-12 schools. They want community gardens, affordable housing, access to mental health resources, and yet resources are spent on creating more unaffordable housing, new parking structures, and businesses. Due to how the lines are currently drawn, resources aren't being allocated to communities in need. For example, the city of Fullerton has a clear income divide between North and South Fullerton through the lines of Chapman Avenue. So we just want to ensure that Fullerton lines reflect income level and allow for shared experiences of community members who have faced, pandemic issues during the pandemic, such as housing, resources, and financial aid. And I just want to thank you all for making sure that you make sure that there's accessible language for community members, especially the Asian community and Latinx community, while doing redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have, I think, some more hands raised.
We have 3 more up.
Okay.
Caller ending in 2103. You should be able to unmute. Sorry, 2013. I had a mouse over you. I read you backwards. You're a 310 area code. You press *6, you should be able to unmute.
Hello.
There you are.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Patricia Hanzo, and I am calling. I am glad today there was a meeting where we can meet this advisory commission. And I really strongly urge you to please, in your role, to have the residents as your priority, and that representation is fair, and that the population numbers in the maps that you look at reflect equally, and that each district is fairly populated, and that communities of interest, communities that have things in common, are kept together and not divided. Neighborhoods, specific school neighborhoods maybe, or communities that have different topics that unite them. The parks that they are nearby, that they are not split up. And so hopefully the maps that you look at, you have that into consideration for the priority being the Fullerton resident, not the person who placed you in this committee. Fullerton City Council, to me, seems very polarized at this time, and there is no compromising among the City Council. The City Council members, in my view, are playing too much politics. They haven't passed money that needs to be approved, the $30 million approved from ARPA. It's been just sitting there. So because City Council can't seem to compromise, I hope that this commission to redistrict the boundary maps for the city of Fullerton can compromise and communicate in a healthy fashion and not play the same political game that City Council is playing. Another request I have is for this committee and for the city staff and city manager to put out an email blast to all residents in Spanish, English, Korean, other languages that are a priority in the neighborhood. I'm not sure what the U.S. Census data has for. I'm sure the demographer has this, which languages are spoken in the city of Fullerton, and to have material and the maps actually in those languages so that the city can have, the residents can have input and have it accessible. Another idea is for the city water bill. We all get a water bill, so maybe you can announce the workshops that are coming up in January and all those commission meetings and release of the maps, so it is easier for residents to access and to also provide input in their language or a form of getting translation, whatever you want that to look like, but to make it easier for residents that don't speak English, or maybe they speak English, but another language is better spoken, for them to give their input in writing and at meeting, so in writing or verbally. So those are my thoughts. And again, I'm glad that this is finally starting. I know surrounding cities have already sent out brochures and pamphlets, and I have a feeling Fullerton is kind of lagging on this. So the more you can work on this and kind of meet your deadlines, that would be great.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
And call in user 1. You should be okay to unmute.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amina Mirzakazi. I'm a Fullerton resident. I'd like to share the concerns about the lack of outreach for this public hearing. I get emails, great emails and notices from the city of Fullerton. For example, I got last day, 12/14/2021 for Santa letter drop off. On Monday, I also got last chance to register Art at Home. And I'm wondering why with this redistricting process that just occurs once every 10 years, we can't share the same sense of urgency as a Santa letter drop off and let the community know that this is happening. So I would actually recommend that there be an additional hearing scheduled, that there not be any draft maps issued after this hearing until we have another hearing with proper outreach. And so I would request Chairman Seaborn to please agendize this issue for the next meeting to hold other potential hearings and workshops with proper community outreach. I thank Dr. Levitt for the great presentation. I think I heard that the Hispanic community, you stated, was spread throughout the city. And I think many of us have an understanding that there's a very strong Hispanic or Latinx community of interest in South Fullerton, both Southeast and Southwest Fullerton, as well as other pockets. Looking at the map that you had with the ethnicity overlay very briefly, it seemed to me that some of the color schemes were not equally divided, that like I think it was white or pink had 0 to 25%, and then the last category was 75 to 100%, and somewhere in between there was a 25 to 35%. So it would be great to see a map that has the color of categories evenly divided, 0 to 10% to 10 to 20%, so we can get a proper view of how the community is divided across the city. Lastly, I have a huge concern about outreach to District 5. As was stated at the last commission hearing, there was only one applicant from District 5 to this commission, and there's no one represented on this commission from District 5. And of course, from the City Council, we have one member from District 5. So between the 11 people between the City Council and this commission, there's only one representative from District 5. So I do hope that we go above and beyond to reach out to the Latinx community, specifically in District 5 and District 4 as well. And I don't think that we can say that we can't find a venue. I think we should make it imperative to find a venue there and find...
and that's your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
And we have one more hand raised. Call in user 2.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Maureen.
Thanks, Lucinda. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I have 2 requests. Number 1, that the dates be published in the Observer whenever possible, and also that hard copies of this presentation and all future presentations be available. Sorry to make the work extra, but with all the information that was given tonight, it's hard to digest everything without looking at it again. And the other question I have, it was mentioned why the specific dividing lines in the districts are not good at this time. Was there a reason said? I did not hear a reason saying why the district lines were not appropriate. And I think that's about it for this time. And I'll be looking forward to the hard copy so I can study it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Just like that, we have more hands raised now.
Okay.
Sorry, and just like that, I accidentally scrolled down. Sorry, folks. Debbie Stout, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Deborah Stout. I'm an executive director of the Fullerton Collaborative, also a professor at Cal State Fullerton, and most importantly, a mom and a resident here in Fullerton. I just wanted to just thank the council and for your time tonight going through and listening to public comment, and also want to echo and also support your efforts in reaching out to the community and invite you to share with the Fullerton Collaborative. We work with all the nonprofits in the city, and it would be nice to know so we can share with the nonprofits and the community members at large as well. And I just wanted to just shout out and just give you thanks again for all your work.
Thank you. We'll now go to the next speaker.
And as of right now, this is our last hand raised. Marcy Fry, you should be okay to unmute. Marcy Fry, you'll have to unmute on your end.
Is that
there you are. We got you.
Great.
Yes, that's you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Fry, and I'm a longtime Fullerton resident. I'm very interested in this process. I have not been following it that carefully, but I'm coming up to speed kind of quickly, and I think that a lot of people are coming up to speed quickly. And the transparency and ethics are really, really important to me. And a lot of us really care about that. I too have concerns about the commissioners and having special interests and trying to weave those special interests into into a gerrymandered districts for the benefit of their special interest. And I'm glad that there are laws that protect against that, because I think it's very important to have ethics at the top of this, and that we really want to serve the community. We want to serve the people of Fullerton, not special interests, and not Democrat versus Republican. We need to be fair about that. We need to be fair about everything. Also fair about not trying to strategically move certain people out that are of one party, not try to get the minority leaders out. It's just very important. And I want you to know that there are people that are going to notice, and that we care about Fullerton, we care about ethics, we care about doing the right thing for the residents of Fullerton. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I hit the right button, that is the last hand raised.
Okay. In that case, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the committee. And I would have a couple of questions for our demographer and for clerk. For the demographer, did you take notes? Are you preparing a response to some of the questions that we received?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute, and I'd like to ask our clerk, what is the proper process, protocol for a hearing and putting out public notice?
This was publicly noticed. It did the 10-day notice. We did it in all 4 of our election languages. We are required under the current laws to do Spanish and Korean. We are also doing, just to mimic what we did for our original districting process, we're also doing, I just lost track where I was, Vietnamese and Chinese, other language too. So we're doing a little above and beyond what's required of us. So again, the usual public hearing notice requirements are there.
And so when we make a public hearing notice, I know that there's a kiosk out front that we would put it in. I think there was one at the library. They're spread out around the city, or they're
right.
not?
It goes on our website. It goes in the newspaper, which 3 people might read in the newspaper. The public hearing notice itself doesn't get a lot of circulation. We blast it on our e-blast list. We put it on the website. But we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that. So.
And those are above and beyond what's legally required,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the social media, we usually don't put the public notice itself on the social media. We'll do something that's a little more consumer friendly and less boring than a public hearing notice on the social media. We'll do that also. While I have the microphone, if it's okay, I'd like to plug that we also have an e-blast group specifically for emails to do with redistricting. So there is a link on that from our redistricting website that I'm checking right now to make sure it's still there. Matter of fact, it's so obnoxious when you click the contact button on the Redistrict Fullerton page, it has a little pop-up that goes right there to sign up for that e-list. So
great.
Sorry if that's annoying for people. They don't like pop-ups. Also, if I could really quickly thank the caller that said our FAQ are not on our website because they were there. We loaded them a few weeks ago. I'm not sure why they dropped off. I will get those back up there right away. I have not been checking that much this week.
Well, on that same topic, I was going to suggest that, there are some key dates that we've already determined where things legislatively have to happen. If we could put those key dates in the agenda just as a standing rolling thing so that at every hearing notice, when somebody looks at the agenda, there's a kind of a calendar of what to expect.
Agenda forecast.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful for folks to be able to see.
Yeah, and they are under, if you go to the Redistrict Fullerton page, which has a button on our cityoffullerton.com homepage, it's under the process schedule tab. Yes.
Because everybody looks there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put as many places as we can.
I appreciate it. I know you can't cater to everybody that looks at the computer screen.
And
so.
I'll note that statewide, I noticed on my city clerk's listserv that There's a lot of organizations that are just not getting a lot of participation in redistricting this year, and we're all trying to share ideas about outreach. So if anybody has any suggestions, please send them to that districtelections@cityoffullerton.com email. We'll see what we can implement, budget permitting, and please, if you have other people you'd like to outreach to on your own, share it on your own social media, help us get the word out. We'd really appreciate it.
Well,
'Cause
getting information out electronically really doesn't cost us much. I mean,
No.
a few minutes to
Yeah.
send it, and that's
Mhm.
about it. So anything we can do and that the public can do to help, I
Yeah.
think is great. I'm going to turn it over to our demographer to answer questions that he was taking notes on so diligently.
And I'll just go through a few of these questions. And really I have a few answers. We do have to follow census geography. So we are limited or bound to whatever the census blocks as they were drawn for the 2020 census are. Now, census blocks are smaller than our population units that we saw on the screen earlier, so just those are kind of made up of blocks, and same with block groups or tracts. Those are made up of census blocks. They're smaller. If there is a boundary that we want to look at as a potential boundary, let us know, and we can see whether or not there is a block boundary there or where the block boundary is in that area. So with respect to race, it's actually a very interesting set of Supreme Court cases, and that have actually kind of said race cannot be the only factor or the predominant factor in the creation of a district, but, and you know, they use the term protected class communities, groups that are protected by the Voting Rights Act, so groups that have faced discrimination or barriers to receiving information in their language, have to have their rights protected. And so walking that fine line between, you know, a district that is only justifiable or only mostly justifiable only on the basis of race versus a district that protects a community's right to vote is, you know, I mean, it sounds like we're splitting hairs, right? But we're not. What we're really looking for are those other factors that go into communities of interest, everything from income and housing to the environmental justice concerns and other policy concerns that also establish that there is a unique community that should be kept together for communities of interest reasons as much as simply because of the color of their skin or the language that they speak. And the real intent, I think, of the way the Supreme Court has ruled on voting rights issues has been to say that we do have to absolutely protect the rights of those protected class voters and communities, not just voters, but the communities. But we have to make it about more than just the racial story. Drawing a line only because it's the division between, to put a 100% Latino block in one district and a 10% Latino block in a separate district, that's not legal. But if we could say like, well, there is a real community boundary here, and the area that's south of this street has a very different income, occupation, every structure than the community to the north, then that is certainly justifiable. And it's what we want to do as part of this process. In addition, I did want to also address overlapping communities of interest because that is a real concern. And in fact, we have actually seen in your neighboring city of Anaheim where there are communities of interest within communities of interest, small communities of interest, and then a larger community of interest encompassing that. And that can be a challenge, particularly under the Fair Maps Act, where we have to keep communities and neighborhoods together. How do we decide which one takes priority? There can be many different alternatives. If we want to talk about the processes or different alternatives, we can certainly do so, especially looking at maps. But often I would say that, we will see that certain issues often have come to the forefront. We want to avoid the division of those neighborhoods that might make up the community of interest, though. We might want to keep that small apartment complex or that small, neighborhood within the community together at all costs. But we might say like, this community that's really based on a whole bunch of community testimony is more important than one that's only there because there's a specific plan area that the city has designated this to be a community. And so we really need to listen to community feedback to help us understand which community of those overlapping or potentially overlapping areas is the right way to put the line. And to the extent we can then use principles like following a major boundary to help us do that, we should. Oftentimes there may be people on the border of that community on either side of a major street. And the overlap is because people who are on both sides of that major street, right on the street itself, identify as members of both community. We see this all the time in commercial corridors, where some commercial zones like to be in overlapping communities of interest because then they join two different neighborhood groups and can promote their business in both neighborhood groups. And so we need to look at those reasonings and justifications for where those community boundaries are as to what makes the most sense. Other than that, I really appreciate all the comments about environmental justice and following parks and with respect to Chapman Avenue. And we look forward to continuing to hear about these specific lines and streets and neighborhoods as we look toward the draft maps moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your input, and thank you to the public for your input on this at this hearing. At this time, we will consider a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If the clerk will please take the roll for receive and file.
Because you're wearing a mask, Commissioner Nelson, was that you that moved?
My ventriloquism act. Yeah.
Well, and I wasn't looking at the dais when you did it, so I just want to be sure. Clerk's got to get the minutes right. So let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Jaramillo? Aye. Vice Chair Lira?
Aye.
Commissioner Seaborn, Chair Seaborn?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Seminara?
Aye.
Commissioner Vallejo? And online, Commissioner Bushala?
Aye.
Great, passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the October 26, 2021 Commission meeting minutes. And again, is there any corrections or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, but really quick, I need to find out, do we need to take public comments?
We should on minutes.
All right, if somebody needs to make a public comment on the minutes, I'll open that up to the public. I don't see anybody in the council chamber. Is there anybody online?
Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. No.
Okay, so motion and a second. If the clerk will please take the roll.
Commissioner Jaramillo?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lira?
Aye.
Chair Seaborn?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Seminara?
Aye.
Commissioner Vallejo? And Commissioner Bushala?
Aye.
Great, passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. And finally, we get to public comments for items not on the agenda, and open that up at this time.
No hands on Zoom.
Okay. Some heavy thoughts going on. Ms. Rands?
It's whether or not it's considered on the agenda. Because it's about locations, which isn't on the agenda. I was wondering if the commission could have some discussion about those upcoming meetings and the locations. Or if there's an opportunity for anyone in the public who has some ideas, maybe someone who lives in District 5 that might have an idea of what would be an appropriate location. And I want to reiterate what the city clerk said about our community centers that we taxpayers pay for aren't available to us because they've been leased out. Doesn't sound good. But, what are our options? Does anyone on this commission have ideas of where those meetings could be held? Because this is really the only public time to have a discussion about those locations before those get noticed. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, no other public comments here. I will, is there anybody online with their hand raised? No, okay. So we'll close public comments, and now would be a good time for commission members and staff to have any other reports or discussion items as you see fit. I'll open that up if there's any member that has anything to share. No?
I do.
Okay. Member Jaramillo.
Regarding the notification, almost everybody that spoke on the phone or here, there's an issue with it, and I did speak to Chairman Seaborn about it at our very, very first meeting. I don't know, the city of Fullerton has always had a problem with that, always, 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 since I got hired here in 1980. So I know that it is an issue, it's always been an issue. These maps are an important subject right now. They're on trend. It's a hot button issue. Everybody's watching. I don't understand why, with social media, we can't notify on next door neighbor, the collaborative main person, give them the authority to send out to all of their people in their email boxes about this. And St. Jude, I don't know if Barry Ross is still there, but I know he's a big community member and has hundreds, I'm sure, of emails of residents of Fullerton that would be interested. You know, I just don't want to be on the short end of this whole thing where they can talk about our whole process and, you know, that it wasn't very equitable, and I worry about that because it's so easy with social media. I don't understand why we still have that problem here. I don't get it anymore. We have so many outlets, so many contacts here. Maybe it's a matter of not having enough employees. I get that. I know we're severely understaffed. But it is an important issue. And we're going to hear about it. We're going to be bad-mouthed about it, you know, if we don't do the right thing here. Because this is an important issue. Everybody knows about the old maps. They know they weren't kosher. So, of course, we want to try to do the right thing this year. So I think we need to make that that outreach better. Totally. We can do way better. Lucinda, I wanted to ask you about Anise. I never knew her, but I used to see social media posts from her all the time with things that were happening at the city of Fullerton. I don't even know if she's still here or what, but it was such a nice change for the last maybe 3 years, and then maybe for the last year. I haven't seen any more posts like that on Instagram, on Nextdoor, on anything about happenings at the city. Is she not here anymore?
She's still here. I can't speak to what her workload's like and what content she's getting to post on her social media.
Okay,
So.
well, she did an excellent job for a few years, and
That might be
You
something
know.
to bring to the city manager's attention.
Yeah, I will forward
Yeah.
that for sure. So, and again, the drawback to social media is that reach is great, but it's only as good as it is as people that are signed up for our page too. So we really,
yeah. I mean,
For
I
sure.
understand that. Yeah, and that's true too.
Yeah, so
That's
we'd
true
also
too. But it's
encourage-
better than what we have.
yes, and we definitely appreciate people retweeting, whatever it is you do in some of those other platforms for us, and help get it out to people that you know also, because you may have people that follow you on your social media that we don't have reach to.
And you know, that's new to me because I didn't know. News to me. And I'll do that from here on out.
Just be
for
very-
any meeting. I didn't know that I should do that.
Just
you
with
know,
the
so-
reminder of what we talked about with the Brown Act and social media, you can forward. I would not suggest you comment or
Oh, no,
yeah,
no, no, no,
anything
yeah,
else.
I get it.
I'm getting
I
the
get
look
that.
from the city attorney over
But
there.
just to notify of a meeting would be nice. Yeah, I can do that too.
Yeah, and encourage people to sign up for our e-blast list or one of our social media accounts too. Please, the more the merrier. Our district elections e-blast account does not have that many people on it right now. So
I wonder if we could utilize microphone here. I wonder if we could utilize the school districts perhaps to disseminate information on our behalf. We get emails from Peach Jar, for example. The Fullerton Elementary uses Peach Jar. We get emails from all the arts, from numerous organizations within the city. That is one way that we might be able to disseminate information.
I'm not sure of their policy, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, I
so
know
we certainly will do that.
My understanding is a lot of folks can put things through the district's email service like through Peach Jar, but there's a fee for that the district charges, I think because Peach Jar charges. But
Okay.
not opposed to looking into that. I mean, any way we can get out word, that's fine. I think that's great. And that is a very reasonable approach, especially if it's something as that can be done electronically with minimal staff time.
Right.
And I think that's the key, because I think Member Jaramillo hit the nail on the head with staffing, with the shortages. So
And I don't think we're allowed to use Alert OC, so.
Yeah, well,
It's
you know.
not that much of an emergency.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, any other comments? One? Okay, Member Nelson.
Thank you. And listening carefully, I do think I understand correctly. Every council member had an opportunity to appoint someone to the commission, and then Johnny come lately, I was appointed sort of by the 5 that had been appointed.
Correct.
But 2 different commenters mentioned tonight that no one on the committee represents the 5th district, and is that real, or do they just misunderstand?
That's correct. Out of all the applications we received, and off the top of my head, I don't remember how many, so don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was about 30 applications for the commission. I don't know if anybody remembers what number I may have said before. That was a long time ago in the clerk world. But yes, there was only 1 application from District 5.
You know, you don't have to worry about District 5. I was born and raised in District 5. I still have a lot of friends and family in District 5. So my concerns have always been in District 5, although I live in District 4. But it's right next door.
Thank you for saying
have
so.
District 5
Thank
by
you.
proxy then.
Yeah, I mean, it just, hearing that just seemed a little unusual that, well, wait a minute, each council member got to appoint someone, but if director or committee member Jaramillo's got their best interests at heart, then we'll get them covered.
That seems to be fairly consistent with all of our committee recruitments also. I think we get more from other districts, but usually more than 1 from 5.
Okay, with that, Member Bushala, I can't see if you have your hand up and you have any comments or not.
I do have one comment to make about District 5. I lived in District 5 for about 24 years until I moved to District 2 about 2 years ago. So I know District 5 very well. I know the neighborhood. I know the community. And I'm not saying that I represent that community, but I know it very well. And I have my office is in District 5 right now. And I have my brother lives in District 5. So I feel very connected to District 5 and probably more than I do with District 2. But anyways, I just wanted to share that with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, the elephant in the room on that is that while there may be people who are within those districts, live within those districts are going to vaporize and be changed. They may or may not be the same or represented in the same way. So I think all the commission members need to have an open mind to listen to the public, see what their input is, where they feel their communities of interest are, where their natural boundaries are for their communities of interest, and take a look at those and see if we can make some homogeneous sense out of it to come up with a map. So at least that's my mindset and my plan going forward. And with that, I think we will adjourn until, what's our next meeting?
Your next public hearing is not until February, if you asked me 5 minutes ago, I had it memorized. February 23rd, I believe, is the next public hearing.
Okay.
The workshop dates are January 13th. That'll be at 6 p.m., January 19th at 10 a.m., and February 10th at 6 p.m. That January 29th is a Saturday.
And do we have a location for the January?
I can announce tentatively. We are have the Chapman Building for January 13th. January 29th is this side of town, the Orange Thorpe Building, and we're also going to be at EV Free. And I'm also stalling because I may have gotten the 2 weeknights reversed, but those are the 3
Okay.
locations.
All right.
I'm saying they're tentative because they don't have some of those don't have internet access, and we'd like to be able to have Zoom and broadcast there if we can. So we might be able to hotspot, but we'll see. So
Are we unable to use, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking again, are we unable to use the schools since they have all of the capabilities
Yeah, we couldn't
We
use
would
the
be-
school district. They weren't available, but
the schools themselves, for example, we use the elementary school in District 5.
we could try the elementary schools in 5. We couldn't. We did Sunny Hills last time around. We couldn't use that now because the gym is not ADA accessible. So that's the other thing is the ADA requirements are very stringent. So we also have to do that. But I think if my Wi-Fi hotspot idea works, I think we're good.
Okay.
Excuse me,
making no
Yolanda, Lucinda, did you mean the Orangethorpe United Methodist Church?
No, not the church. So we have it's Orangethorpe and I can't remember the cross street now, but we have a city facility.
Oh, a
next to
city
the
facility.
one that's next to
Okay.
the school down there. Or maybe I'm thinking Brookhurst. I'll have to get you the addresses for sure. So.
Or the
Okay.
Gilbert Center, maybe.
Yeah, not Gilbert. Gilbert is
Gilbert,
one of
okay.
those neighborhood centers. So it's one of
Okay,
the
I won't
smaller
guess that anymore.
buildings.
Okay. Well, with that, this commission is adjourned until February 23rd.